So yesterday, more states voted on Super Tuesday 3, and I'm sure that by now you all want to move on from that, but I just want to take a moment to really just talk about how the DNC and state Democratic parties put people's lives at risk. Now, thankfully, Ohio chose to postpone its primary. I think they made the correct decision. But nonetheless, 3 states still went ahead with their Democratic Party primaries. Florida, Arizona, and Illinois. And at a time where the CDC is telling us to avoid large crowds and to self-quarantine and, practice social distancing, the fact that this would still go on, it's deeply problematic. I would even argue that it's undemocratic, because even if the right to vote is sacred and postponing any election in and of itself, it makes me feel uneasy. Think about the impact that this has on democracy. Like, maybe you want to vote, but you're choosing to be responsible and not leave your home, so you don't vote. Imagine if you did choose to brave it and vote anyway, and then if you're immunocompromised or, you are exposed to COVID, since this is asymptomatic, you could expose others who are vulnerable, the elderly, and make more people sick. Like, how many people is this going to endanger by going ahead with these primaries that could have easily been postponed, right? We don't know how long, maybe 4 weeks, maybe 8 weeks, but we just know that currently, to contain the spread of COVID-19, social distancing is of the utmost necessity. If you don't have to go out, you shouldn't. And we should have these state Democratic parties and the DNC all trying to follow these guidelines, but that didn't happen. The opposite happened. Look at this tweet from James Packard. He shared this video of a line of people waiting to vote in Chicago, Illinois, and it obviously had more than 200 people. They weren't standing far enough from each other, and this is at a time when they're being told to avoid crowds with more than 10 people. Abshir Omar shared this video of people waiting to vote at the Thurgood Marshall Public Library, and they're waiting around 2 hours to vote. This is mostly elderly people. And then he also shared this photo of people waiting to vote in a poorly ventilated basement at Gage Park. And he pointed out that the line here, you're waiting a little more than an hour, but people are just choosing to go home because they just don't want to risk it. They feel uneasy being in public when we are being told to stay indoors. And then you have this tweet from Adam E. Ross, who I think very reasonably was scared. He says, "I'm so effing scared to vote tomorrow that I'm crying. I don't want to get coronavirus. I don't want to die." And then he says, "Update, it's 6 a.m. I'm in line. I'm scared shitless. I'm doing this for Bernie. I'm doing this for me. I'm doing this for you." So, people shouldn't have to make this decision. I get not wanting to postpone primaries because democracy is sacred. But at the same time, you can't really have a democracy that is, robust if people are afraid to vote because of a global pandemic where every single country in the world is trying to deal with this and contain it. Now, you'd think that the DNC chairman in particular, Tom Perez, would be doing everything in his power to encourage states to adopt vote by mail and, tell them to postpone this if they need to. But he's not doing that, and this is what he said on MSNBC in an interview with Chris Hayes. This was just completely irresponsible.
It is your view that this can be safely conducted tomorrow. Who have you been consulting to come to that view?
Well, again, we didn't intervene in that case.
No, I know. This is a state matter, but I'm asking your position as Tom Perez, the head of DNC. Sure. My understanding is you're saying you agree with the states that are going forward.
Yes, we respect what they're doing, and we always encourage everyone. And I was in contact today with people in a number of these states, including but not limited to Arizona, and again asking them if they believe they have the systems in place that enable them to put the elections on tomorrow, and they do. And Republican and Democratic governors have made that judgment that they can do that. I don't think it's for me to second guess those judgments, Chris, and so. I respect that.
So in other words, ignore what the CDC is saying. Ignore the necessity of social distancing. These state party leaders and governors, they think that the primaries can still go on as planned, so I'm going to trust them. Except you are in a position of leadership, and you are complicit now in endangering their lives. How much of this virus will spread specifically because of these primaries that are taking place? Will people die because of this? These are serious implications. Like, we should be talking about this. So currently what Tom Perez should be doing, if I'm the DNC chair, if I'm in a position of power, is I'm saying, listen, every single state should postpone their primary for at least 4 weeks. And meanwhile, we are going to be rolling out a vote-by-mail system. We're going to be helping these states have the capacity and the resources that they need to actually carry out a competent vote-by-mail system, because this is just too serious and we don't want to take any chances. But that's not what's happening. In fact, the DNC is actively encouraging states to not postpone their primaries. I mean, look at this headline here from The Hill. DNC calls on states not to postpone primaries. And on top of that, as The Guardian reports, states delaying primaries past June 9th may face delegate penalty, warns DNC memo. Democratic National Committee reacts to Ohio postponement with memo that says party working with states on coronavirus measures. So, I mean, this is criminal. This is criminal, and we'll get to the articles. But how could you put people's lives at risk when you don't have to do that? There's other options. You can postpone it. You can roll out vote by mail. 4 to 8 weeks is more than enough time to have a vote by mail system in place for these states who haven't yet voted. We're not looking at all 50 states, and the additional territories. Like, you have a limited amount of states that haven't voted. You have states like Oregon that already have vote by mail, so you don't have to worry about that. Why are you doing this? It's unbelievable to me. Now, getting to that article from The Hill, as Jonathan Easley reports, in a statement, DNC Chairman Tom Perez said that states should begin mailing ballots to all registered voters and to implement no-excuse absentee voting, which allows voters to drop their ballots off at pre-approved sites. In addition, Perez said that polling places should expand their hours and days of service to reduce lines and crowds. The DNC chairman said that postponing elections, as several states have done, is not the right answer. States that have not yet held primary elections should focus on implementing the aforementioned measures to make it easier and safer for voters to exercise their constitutional right to vote, instead of moving primaries to later in the cycle when timing around the virus remains unpredictable, Perez said. The right to vote is the foundation of our democracy, and we must do everything we can to protect and expand that right instead of bringing our democratic process to a halt, he added. Now, him encouraging vote by mail is important, but the message here isn't unequivocal. He's saying if you can't roll out vote by mail, then there are other measures that you should be taking. You can extend polling hours to make sure that the lines aren't as long and there's, less people in closed quarters. Except you should have been doing that anyway. Like, why does it take a global pandemic for you to want to reduce the size of lines? That should be something that you're already doing. Having nationwide vote by mail is something the DNC could have been encouraging under your leadership. I get that states ultimately are in control, but you can be using the tools and resources that you have as DNC chairman to encourage these things. But the fact that you're encouraging them to not move these primaries back just a little bit to see what's going to happen, it is deeply, deeply irresponsible. And the DNC sent out a memo basically saying, look, if you choose to postpone your primaries, there's a cutoff date to where we are going to penalize you if you do, in fact, do that. 3 states will hold primaries on Tuesday. They already voted by the time you see this video. A 4th, Ohio, postponed its vote on Monday due to COVID-19 and its drastic effect on public life. Louisiana, Kentucky, Georgia, and Maryland have also postponed their votes. As in virtually every part of U.S. society, election officials at every level have been discussing ways to safely administer elections without spreading the coronavirus. The new DNC memo obtained by The Guardian was sent to members of the Rules and Bylaws Committee on Wednesday night. We are working with state parties that need to make adjustments as needed to their delegate selection process so they can continue without major interruptions, wrote James Roosevelt and Lorraine Miller, the co-chairs of the Rules and Bylaws Committee, in the memo. The regulations allow technical changes to be approved by the co-chairs. A number of states have taken dramatic steps to prevent spreading the coronavirus. Late on Monday night, Ohio's Governor Mike DeWine announced that his administration would order polling stations closed because of the health emergency. Several states have taken steps to change the date of their first determining step. The DNC memo memo said. It continued, the delegate selection rules provide that each state's first determining step must take place by 9 June. If a state violates the rule on timing or any other rule, they could be subject to penalties as described in Rule 21, including at least a 50% reduction in delegates, which will need to be reviewed by the RBC, that's the Rules and Bylaws Committee. The deadline to elect convention participants is the 20th of June, so state parties should have plenty of time to elect their delegates, alternates, and standing committee members. Now, June is quite a ways away, so states by then absolutely should figure out some way to carry out vote by mail, right? That's more than enough time. If you can't do that, then what are you doing? But, I mean, the message from the DNC isn't one of, hey, we're here to help you out, use our resources, use us for information and planning. They're saying, get it done, or we're going to penalize you and possibly strip 50% of your delegates away. This is just insanity. I don't know how else to describe this. It's insanity. It is insanity. What is Tom Perez and the DNC doing? On one hand, he's saying, well, look, we care about this disease and, we do want to practice social distancing and we would like vote by mail. But on the other hand, if you can't get it done, we're going to screw you over. Rather than trying to assist them, you're trying to flex and intimidate them into not postponing the primaries. Now, the question is, why are they being so irresponsible? I mean, at first, you'd think it's because they want to hurry up, get the primaries over with because they want to protect Joe Biden. If you extend it, that opens the door to, a momentum shift and Bernie Sanders regaining ground. But at the same time, I mean, is that really going to happen? How likely is that? So I don't even know what their reasoning is. If they're that paranoid, then they're kind of being unreasonable. But I mean, there's no excuse for what they're doing. Look, I get that the right to vote is sacred. I truly believe that. But you can't really have a true democracy if people are afraid to come out and vote because they don't want to be exposed to something that could kill them. So either way, democracy is being jeopardized here. If you go on with these primaries as planned, then you are discouraging people from voting because they are being responsible and they don't want to expose themselves and their loved ones to COVID-19. But if you postpone it, sure, that's problematic, but it's not like they're going to be canceled altogether. So I don't know what to say. It's brainless, it's irresponsible, it's borderline criminal. Now, thankfully, someone who agrees with me here said this exact same thing, albeit on a much larger platform. So this is what Alexander Rojas said on CNN.
I was going to say that I think in this moment, in the midst of a pandemic where we know that millions of American lives are at risk, it feels like an abdication of leadership, a democratic leadership in this moment to carry forward. I know that most of the states like Arizona and Florida have vote by mail. You have absentee ballots of folks voting early. But just as the right to vote is sacred, so is every American life. Sure. And I think that unprecedented times and moments of uncertainty call for unprecedented measures. And so even if it's just one vote or a few votes, right, it matters the fact that we are, it feels like we were kind of talking about how young people were crowding bars and going into public places just a few days ago, yet we're pushing forward on primaries.
So are you saying, you're saying they shouldn't have voting today?
I think that Ohio made the right call. They prioritized the health and well-being of their citizenry. And I think that if the question right now is if we gather in more than groups of 10, which those lines, I think anecdotally, I did not see people standing 6 feet apart. That's really frightening, especially when it comes to the older population, the younger population, where could easily spread it. And so as a young person seeing this in the midst of a pandemic, a potential another recession within my lifetime, it feels very frightening in this moment, and I hope that Democratic leadership follows. That.
And she is absolutely right. To force people to choose between exercising their right to vote and remaining safe, self-quarantining, because it's something that we have to do given the gravity of the situation that we're in, it's just, it's truly inconceivable to me that this is what the DNC is doing at a time where we should all be trying to protect one another. Tom Perez is basically trying to bully states into having their primaries. Now, Super Tuesday 3 is done. Georgia postponed their primaries. I don't know what's going to happen with the Puerto Rico primary, but there's no more primaries, I believe, until April. So for now, hopefully we can practice social distancing. But just the thought of how many more people will exposed, the fact that not postponing the vote may have exposed more people, it's so irresponsible. And Tom Perez should be ashamed of himself, but I say that all the time. And he has no shame, so he absolutely won't. But regardless, if anyone gets sick or dies, the blood is on his hands because he chose to go about it in this way for whatever reason. Maybe it's politically expedient, maybe he's just ignorant. But regardless, the blood is on his hands if people die.
Alpha male, not a beta male.